Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 825. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, Excel Magic Trick 823 to 825, click on the link below the video. In this video here, we're going to look at three examples, piecework, commission, and a tax example. In all these examples, you're given a table with various rates. So for piecework, if we're making boomerangs, the first 50 is paid $1. Then from 51 to 75 is paid $1.10, etc. When we do commissions, you get paid 1% for the first 5,000. 5,000 to 1 penny to 7,000, you get 1.5%, etc. Similar for tax. Now, the whole trick is, usually you're given a table like this. To make a single cell formula, the best or one efficient way is to create a table different than this. And one hint is if you go look at income tax tables, one hint they give you is, notice, and this comes this way. We're going to actually have to create this kind of column in for these other two examples. But they say tax from previous brackets. That means everything before this category right here, there was $712.40 tax that was owed. So that really is the trick. Then once we have a single line with all the information, we can just look up the single line and pull from multiple columns. The problem is if you do this by hand, you'd have to do the tax calculation for here, for here, for here, and then add them. All right? All right, so we're going to, anytime you have a table like this, we're going to need a couple different columns. Now, the first one is we're going to need the lower number for the category. In fact, I'm going to say category. And I'm just going to list it like this. List it down here to 150 or more. Good to have the category. Then you know everything flows from this. But you don't use this in a lookup. We know that when we're doing lookup, and it's an approximate match where there's a range of values, you have to list it in ascending order from the smallest, 0. And these are integers here. In a second, when we do the commission, we're going to have a slightly different situation. But there's never going to be any number between 50 and 51. We're going to need upper, actually, also. So I'm going to put upper. Highlight both of those in bold. Actually, I'm going to start with the upper value for each 50 because this is 0 to 50. And here, we can just go equals this plus 1. Right? And then we actually have to type. I'm going to copy this down, and I'm going to add a color, too, because that's a formula. And then this one, we just do 75, 110, 130, 150. And then we don't know what this last one is. We're not going to need that one, though. We're also going to need this pay per. I'm going to Control-C and paste it right here. And now we're definitely going to need two other columns. The whole idea is we get to a certain line. So let's see, 135. Our goal is to calculate the total pay earned from making 135 boomerangs. So we look up through here, bump into the first one bigger. All the information needs to be on this one line for our lookup. So we need number made through previous categories and earnings through previous categories. So I'm going to say, all right, and so we're going to have to make some calculations here. But it all can come from this information here. Now, number made through previous category, the information's already here. It's 50 and then 75. It's just on the wrong row. And we could, you could use match function to jump back a row, but forget that. I want all the information on the same line. So I'm going to say, hey, that's the number made from the previous category. Cumulative, right? So when I get to this line, the question is for here, how many have I made through all the previous categories? It's always going to be the upper limit from the earlier one. So we come down to here. All right. So when I get here, and I need to ask the question, how many did I make from all the number made through the previous category? There it is. Now we can calculate our earnings through previous categories. Now, previous category, well, we had 50 at $1 there. So I'm simply going to say this times that. Enter. And now there's going to be a different calculation for the rest of the column. We need to add this plus any extra new boomerangs we made. Now, in this category, 51 to 75, that's 21. That's counting from 1, 2, 3 up to 75. That's 25, I mean. So 25 times $1.10. So here I'm going to say whatever I made in the previous category plus the new amount from this category. Right? So I'm actually already have the 75 and 50 there, so I'm going to subtract it. 75 minus 50. That'll give me 25 for this category times this $1.10. Now these are all relative cell references, and they'll work all the way down. So when I get to this one, right, I had the 121.25 from before, and then the difference between these two, which is 20 times that $1.50. Now we have all our information. We can do it in a single cell. That shouldn't be there. How did that get there? Now let's think about this calculation right here, 135. We race through here. This is going to be our line here. Now what do we need? Well, we do need all of the earnings from the previous category. Slap it in there. Plus, we have 135. And from that, we need to subtract to figure out how many are at $1.75. Subtract all the number from the previous category. So it's 135 minus 130 times this. Now, when we're actually going to have either 3 VLOOKUPs or 3 lookup functions all in one formula. And that's kind of hard for a lot of people. So you can come out to the side. This was the hard part, actually. The hard part was creating this so that we had all the information on one line. So before doing it, let's just do this. Let's see if we can do it. Once we had the table, maybe we'd do it individual calculations like this. So we'd go, not parentheses, we'd go, the amount from the previous category. And then I'm going to add, in parentheses, 135 minus all the number we sold so far. Now that'll give us 5, right? Times this $1.75. Now think about this. What do we really want? There's 1, 2, 3 bits of information all from this line. So really, you can look at that F18 as one lookup. That's just going to be a cell. This as a second lookup, and this as a third lookup. All only based on what? The units, 135. That's the number of units we made. All right? Now, let's put that there, and let's go ahead and do it all in one form. You could also do it this way. You could have 3 different cells doing 3 different lookups. Now, I usually use VLOOKUP. And what would we do? We'd say VLOOKUP, and here'd be the whole table. VLOOKUP, well, the first thing we need is that amount. So it would be VLOOKUP with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 column plus, and then in parentheses, it would be this amount minus. So in fact, let's do this. You could do like VLOOKUP. I'm going to do like V5. This would be like our notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we go plus, in parentheses, well, this 135, I'm just going to type, it's B10, so I'll just put B10. Minus, well, it's another VLOOKUP. 1, 2, 3, 4, so I'm going to put V-4. And then close parentheses, because this calculation is going to be in parentheses, times what? Another VLOOKUP, 1, 2, 3. So V-3. Now, you could do the VLOOKUP 5, 4, 3, no problem. But I'm going to choose to use the lookup function. Now, the lookup function only can do approximate match. And that's what we have. We're looking up this number, approximate match. And the cool thing about the the lookup function is that you never have to put in the argument for number of columns. You just highlight a table, and lookup always takes the last column. So no problem. If you like the VLOOKUP, you do follow that, and you can do the VLOOKUP. But watch this. Let's do equals lookup. Lookup value is going to be this, comma. And remember, what's the thing we want first? That column. Now, I highlighted this table. Lookup is programmed to always take it from the last column. You can enter that and see that that gives us the right number, right? Plus, in parentheses, this. And we need another, and I'm going to use lookup. Lookup, still looking up this. It's just like VLOOKUP, except for it only does approximate match. Now we want the fourth one, so the table I'm going to highlight is there. It's programmed to take the item from the last column, so it'll slap that 30 there. Close parentheses. You can F9 it and prove it to yourself. Control Z. And then close parentheses times lookup. Same lookup value, comma. And I'm going to highlight, because I want this one, just that. All right, and so that should work all the way 160. You could also, so we did this one to test it. You could also, if you wanted to triple check if you're doing it right, and of course I always do because I mess up so often, you could just do it the, ooh, that's a long, terrible way. But that got the right answer too. All right, now let's go see, not a piecework example, but we're going to scroll down and see a commission example. Now here's the categories. Here we're not getting paid a certain amount per boomerang. We're getting paid a commission rate. So if our sales are $22,500, we need to do a similar type of calculation. If you were going to do this by hand, right, you'd have to do 5,000 times this. And then the difference between the upper and the lower, so that's $2,000 times this, etc. So it would be a multi-step calculation. We're going to do it all in one formula, and it's all the way I'm going to approach it is by doing just what we did above, creating a smart table so that once we look this up, right, it finds the right row and all the information we need to make our calculation is in the row. All right, so here's category, lower, upper. I put the upper already. And now the previous example, right, we had integers because there were a number of items made, so we did one. But here, this is money, right? So this is the upper. But the lower here is going to be equals this plus 1 penny. All right, and so we'll copy that down. I just put our information just like we did in the last one. We're still going to need 2 extra categories. Not number of sales, but amount of sales through previous categories, and then the calculated commission. So on any particular line, we know all the commissions from the earlier categories. All right, so the amount of sales from the previous category, that one. All right, on to our next column. We need to calculate the commissions from previous categories, right? So when we get down to here, not only do we know the cumulative sales, meaning the sales dollars, but also the cumulative commission. All right, now this first one here, we simply would take all of our 5,000 times the 1%. All right, and then we'll enter that. But I'm going to use the round function. Now, maybe none of these percentages give us a rounding problem, but this is, in essence, a payroll issue. And we're dealing with pennies, so you're required to round. So I'm going to round to the penny using that 2. Now, that one's easy. But what about this one? Oh, well, to start the formula, I know I need, hey, that commissions I just calculated plus any new commissions. And I'm going to get that by what? Not the whole 7,000, but the 7,000 minus the 5,000. So the upper from this one minus the upper from that one. And that'll give us 2,000 for this category times that 1.5%. Now, those are all relative cell references that will work all the way down, right? So when I go down to the next one, it'll be 9,000 minus 7. And then we can copy down. Now, I'm going to come back up here, and just as I did for the 50 bucks, I need to round this part of it. Open parentheses there. That has already been rounded, right? So I come to the end, comma 2. Copy it down. All right, so here we use the round, right? We don't see any extra pennies, but if you had some different dollar amounts or percentage around, we're just building a robust formula that can handle whatever we put there. So now we have our table. Now we can come up and make our calculation. Now, off to the side, you could just check it to see, OK, what's the idea here? Just like we did up here with our Vlookup, we're basically going to do the same thing here, but with commission. So I'm going to say equals, well, I know I have the amount from all the previous brackets, right? Because I'm looking this number up, racing down here, bumping into the first bigger one, and then that's the line. Plus, well, this 22,000 minus all the sales through the previous category times this rate. OK? So now let's do it with our VLOOKUP. And again, when you're building these for the first time, it certainly is helpful to go, OK, that's VLOOKUP, or lookup in our case we're going to use, just as we did before. Lookup with this column here. That one's a cell. That's a lookup with that column. That's a lookup with the final column there. So again, I'm going to use lookup. It's just shorter and easier to enter. Lookup always does approximate, and it always takes the last value. So this is the first column that's looking up an approximate match. We need the number from the last column, so boom, right? It's going to return that 370. F2 plus, in parentheses, this, minus, well, we need to look up. Here's the same lookup value. And this time I'm going to stop with the sales from the previous category, because the lookup always takes the item from the last one. And we've got to put a closed parentheses. Right, so the difference between these two is going to be multiplied by lookup, and we need the rate. Look up that, comma, and we're going to stop our lookup table with the rate as the last column. Control Enter. Now I am going to round part of this. So the part, this lookup number is getting the previous amount, and that's already been rounded, so it's just this. Some number times some number, and anytime you're dividing or multiplying decimals, you run the risk of a rounding error, comma 2 to the penny. Now I didn't quite get that right when I forgot a parentheses there. So now we got this. That's correct. That's the green green. And when I click here, I can see the right argument. So Control Enter. All right, so that's for commission. And let's test it, right? Let's say 200. And it just should be 200 bucks times 1%. It looks like that's correct. Exactly 5,000. So that's exactly right. 7500. So that should be this 50. So it takes this, it bumps into the first number bigger, right? So it gets this. So it's the 80 bucks plus whatever extra amount is over. Looks like it's working just fine if I put in 75,000. It should be, and you could check this one off in your head, right? Equals the last amount plus, and we're 75,000, and the max is 25,000, right? So it plus 50,000 times the 0.075. All right, so commissions, we saw how to do that there. Now let's look at our last example. I'm going to scroll down here. We have a tax example. Now the nice thing about some tax tables is they actually come with a column that already says, hey, here's the tax from the previous bracket. Up here, you're usually not given that, right? You're just given this type of thing. But tax tables, I know you need that number, right? So there's one problem with this, though. And this is a typical income tax table, whether corporate or individual or married or single or weekly or monthly or whatever. They have a column header here that says over, and then but not over. Now normally for any lookup functions, the first column has to have the smallest number in the category. But check this out. If this is our taxable earnings, this is our line here, but it says over. So that means that number is not included in this category. Really, the number that should be here is $6,304.01, right? So I'm going to add a new column here so we can do the proper lookup. It would be 0 here. And then what do we want? For each one of these, please take that one, and the number immediately over it is plus 0.01, 1 extra penny. Now, we can do our straight lookup, right? If we're doing taxable earnings from this, here's our line right here. We need 712. That's the tax from all the previous categories. Times what? This minus that. That's how much is taxable at 25%. So we need 1, 2, 3 numbers, all done with lookup. All right, let's just do this one flat off. Equals lookup. Oh, there's our lookup number, comma. Lookup is great. First column is sorted in ascending. It always does approximate match, and it always takes the number from the last column. Close parenthesis. That'll give us that 712. And to that, we need to add the additional tax. Hey, here's our total taxable earnings minus what? Well, we need to subtract that number. Lookup. hey, we're looking up this, comma, there's our first column, and this the second column has the number we want. Close parentheses on this difference, times, and then lookup. There's our lookup, comma, and we need the tax rate, so we highlight 4 columns. It's looking up the first one, it finds it, it jumps over to the last column. Close parentheses. 909.52, and we'll round it here. This is the multiplication. Remember, anytime you're doing multiplication and division and you're required to round, especially like with money, use round. Round to the penny. And as with all of the formulas, and the whole point of this is that it's dynamic. So if I change this to 2,000, we get 6870, which is what, the 2,000 minus the, here's our bracket, doing it by hand, so minus that, times the 10%. All right, so we saw a lot here. We saw 3 examples, and the main idea here is anytime you have a bunch of categories of tax rates or commission rates or piecework rates, this is a good formula. So as long as you add your extra columns. So for commissions, we saw we had to have a lower and then these 2 extra, and for piecework, same, the lower and then these 2 extra added columns. All right, see you next video.